Well, welcome back, everybody. This is Pucks from the Pine Tree Pod. I'm your host, Benjamin Kennedy, coming to you tonight from another random hotel room. So, finishing up my work trip here over the next couple of days. We'll be back home soon, but wanted to take the opportunity to get this at least recorded tonight, work on editing over the next couple of days. No music for this one tonight, guys. Just walls are pretty thin, the music's pretty loud, and the last thing I want is any sort of noise complaint tonight. So figured out we'll punt on the music for now. So gonna talk about the Philadelphia Flyers tonight. Interesting team a year ago. This is one of those teams, guys, that they're not an original six, but even as a ardent Bruins fan like I am, I can always try to be a little objective that the league tends to be better. The playoffs tend to be more exciting when Philadelphia's in there. You think about all those old, matchups that Philly and Boston had over the years. It was just a lot of fun, but different time, different space right now for this team. But let's get into it. Starting with head coach John Tortorella, longtime NHL head coach. He has coached in 1,547 regular season games with a record of 742, 612, 37 ties, 156 overtime losses. That gives him a 542 winning percentage. Playoffs, 120 games coached with a 56-64 record. Of course, Stanley Cup winner back in 03-04 with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And for those UMaine fans, of course, he is a Black Bear playing up at Orono from 1979 to 1981 and was inducted into the University of Maine Sports Hall of Fame back in 2022. So another proud Black Bear, always a fun guy to kind of watch on the bench, and he's a unique coach, kind of an old school coach, but always love cheering for those former Black Bears out there. Salary cap wise, this season they're in a little bit of a fight with it right now. They're at a minus 830,000. So they're over the cap right now, according to Puckpedia. They've got 22 of their 23 active roster spots filled, so they'll have a little work to do there. Not a lot of room to move. First round this year, they did have number 13 in the draft, where they took center Jet Lechenko, I think is how you pronounce it. Young centerman, 18 years old, Canadian player, played in the OHL last season, had a really great year. 68 games played for him, 20 goals, 54 assists for 74 points. So I think they're really high on this kid. And, again, only 18, so be a little patient, but should be interesting to watch. Looking ahead, though, they're going to have a real opportunity to do some things in the draft next season or do some things at the trade deadline with some of the assets they have. In 2025, they have 3 first-round selections and 3 second-round selections. So do they use all those picks? Do they trade them for future picks? Do they trade at the deadline to bring in players or move things around? It would be really curious to see. But if they want to, they'll have a big opportunity to really fill their minor league system up and bring in a lot more, young, prospects and players. So should be curious to see how they manage that as we go. Going back to 23-24, interesting year for them. They were in the playoff hunt for a good portion of the year. They were actually not just in the wild card hunt; they were, I think, sitting third in the Metro for a good while last season. They finished the year 38, 33 and 11, 87 points. They ended up in 6th place in the Metro. Of course, missed the playoffs. What really happened was really the last quarter of the season, the last 20 games of the year was awful. It was ugly. They go 6-10 and 4. And in that stretch, they had 8 losses in a row. So if you want to know how to screw up your season and lose a playoff spot late, that's kind of how you do it. That's how you do it right there. I do believe it was Washington that snuck in at 91 points, so they weren't that far out of the playoff spot. Even with that just horrid stretch at the end, if they just played 500 the rest of the way through those 20 games, they probably get in. They probably beat Washington out and are in the playoffs. So really disappointing way from them to end the season. They just flat out ran out of the gas. You could see Tortorella pushing all the buttons, doing all of his his kind of coaching antics. he's not afraid of throwing players under the bus or benching players. And I think he was trying everything in the book, and the team just flat out didn't respond to any of it. So I do worry about that a little bit this year coming. We'll talk more about that here in a second. Looking at the core skaters, forward Travis Konecny led the team in 76 games last year at 33 goals, 35 assists for 68 points. Forward Owen Tippett, one of my favorites, 78 games played. And I should say one of my favorites because I've had him in fantasy hockey the last couple of years, and he's certainly helped me out a little bit. But 78 games for him last year, 28 goals, 25 assists for 53 points. Forward Joel Farabee played the whole season, 82 games, had 22 goals, 28 assists for 50 points. And then forward Travis Sanheim, 81 games played, 10 goals, 34 assists for 44 points. So all familiar names. I'm really curious where Owen Tippett's game goes. I think he's got more trajectory to rise up, so that'll be a lot of fun to see. Goaltending, of course, was a very interesting storyline for the group last year, but their backup ends up playing the bulk of the season. Sam Harrison played in 51 games, and I thought just did a tremendous job in what was a really tough spot. 51 games played, 23-19-7 record with a 2.82 goals against and an 890 save percentage. We'll talk a little bit more about him and the whole goalie situation with Carter Hart and all that. They did bring over Ivan Fedotov. Only got into 3 games. Obviously numbers weren't great. 0-1-1 record, or it might be 0-1-0 record. I'll have to check that, but didn't get into a lot of games. 4.95 goals against and an 811 save percentage. Obviously, a player from the KHL. Again, we'll talk more about him and that whole situation. And of course, Carter Hart making news over the last day. I've looked at a couple of the reports that I guess he was trying to cross back into the States and was denied access. Of course, he's part of that whole nasty case going on with Team Canada from back in 2018 or 2017, something like that. And so if you want to learn more about that, all sorts of information on the interwebs, go check it out. I'll just leave my comments to myself on that one. Key additions for the year, guys, obviously, given their cap situation, they were not very busy July 1st. They do bring over Matei Michkov from Russia, one of their exciting draft picks from a couple years ago. He does get out of his contract there and comes on over. And then for Anthony Ricard comes over as well. So not very busy. They do lose Cam Atkinson in free agency, so one of their veteran guys out the door. And these are just, again, key guys. This isn't the exhaustive list of everything they did, but it's kind of the key players as we've been talking about, tend to talk about with all this kind of stuff. So there's always one thing, though, when we talk about John Tortorella coach teams. There's some things you can always count on. They're going to play hard. They're going to skate hard. We know this. Tortorella won't put up with anything less. We saw this last season, up until about 20 games left to go. They were hard to play against, regardless of the outcome, win or lose. They were just a nasty, hard team at times to play against. The problem, of course, is they ran out of gas, as we talked about just a moment ago. The last 20 games there, they just completely got gassed out. As we know, they were not very active July 1st. The salary cap really driving that for them, limiting really what they could do to add to this group. So it really does mean that the group is going to be very similar coming into October. They do add Michkov. I think he's going to be really exciting to watch. Expectations for him are really all over the map at this point. We do have to remember he is still just 19 years old, and he's going to have to really kind of adjust to playing at the NHL. It's definitely a solid level above what he's used to. So I think some patience will be needed. But I think if he can continue to progress his offensive game, he should, long-term, be able to provide some firepower for the group. Last season, he played in 47 games at the KHL level, had 19 goals, 22 assists for 41 points. So a solid season over there. And, KHL, for those of you who don't know, kind of a level probably right around the AHL. I would say some might argue that the KHL is a little bit better. Some might even say AHL might have a step on them. But kind of put him in the same category. So really good, brand of hockey. But there's clearly a big step up when you come to the National League. But I think he'll have a lot of potential. Should be fun to watch. Again, regardless of how the team performs this year, I think he'll be a player to keep an eye on. One thing we didn't talk about, and I do apologize, I kind of skipped over the team stats. I apologize for that. Let's go back to the team stats because this really speaks to my next point about their offense. But their goals for last season, they were at 2.82. That ranks them 27th in the league. Goals against were at 3.15, ranking them 19th. They were minus 27 in the goal differential for the season. Power play, ugly, I think is probably the nicest thing I can say for this number. They were 12.2%, 32nd out of 32 teams. So you got on the PK with them. There was very little fear of them scoring. They really struggled. PK, on the other hand, they were fourth in the league at an 83.4%. So they weren't giving up a lot of goals in that case. Face-off dot, they were at 19th in the league at 49.7%. So they were in the middle of the pack on that number. But yeah, just going back to the offense, those metrics are just dreadful. 32nd in power play, and the goals, 4 goals against, just really being bad. Didn't matter if they were playing 5-on-5 or on the power play. Just putting the puck in the net was just a challenge all season for this team. Knowing that's largely the same group coming back, how does the coaching staff address this? Do they install a different kind of systematic approach or system or a different method? They definitely got to change up their power play. I mean, it's just, you cannot accept 32nd in the league. You've got to be better there coming into this season. Is it that they just need more guys to play more consistently and step up? You've got some of these kids like Brink we haven't talked about, guys like that there's probably more to their games, and they just maybe need to have some more consistency and more consistent effort when it comes to the offense. But I think it's going to be really key to see how this offense starts kind of early in the season, kind of from puck drop in October to U.S. Thanksgiving. Where is this team offensively? Because given where the cap is, they're not going to have room to fix this, even though they have all the draft capital in the world that they can trade and go out and get players. Unless money's going back out, they're not going to have a lot of room to go out and get a veteran guy to come in and fix this. So I mean, the answers have to be in that room if they're going to make a go of it. So I'm going to be really curious to watch how this offense performs as we get into kind of that November U.S. Thanksgiving timeframe. Defensively, they did make the trade, of course, with Anaheim, with Cutter Gauthier going out the door and Jamie Drysdale coming in. And, of course, last year they added Erik Johnson later in the year to go along with Sanheim and New York and this defensive group. I'm curious to see how Drysdale develops. He's been in the league now a couple of years. There's potential there. We know that. Anaheim knew that. Of course, they're so loaded with talent. Getting Gauthier for Drysdale, I think, was a good move for the Ducks. But there's potential there with Drysdale. He just needs to stay healthy. He's dealt with a couple really bad injuries so far in his career, and you just hope the kid can stay healthy and start to realize that potential. Listen, we know the group will be gritty. They're going to play hard. They were 4th in the PK last season, so we know defensively they can get the job done. I do wonder about the overall depth. And I think it's a question you can ask about a lot of teams at this point in the years. Organizationally, where's their defensive depth? They have some guys hanging out. I think it's Lehigh Valley, or their AHL team that can maybe come up. I don't know. How do they deal with injuries with the defense? Again, it's a question you can ask about a lot of teams, but I think it's worth asking about this group as well. Ersson, as we talked about, did a great job last season, given the circumstances with Carter Hart. He was expected to be the backup, and he goes out there and plays over 50 games. Carter Hart, I think that whole thing went down November. So it was pretty early in the season when he was basically whipped up to Canada to deal with all the legal troubles. Ersson really bailed the team out. I think he was a big story of keeping them in, because once Hart was gone, you really thought, this team's just going to fall off the map. Because how many teams could put a backup in there for that many games and get away with it? I guess what you are seeing today, though, is a lot of teams. You look at the Bruins the past couple of years, is you have more of these tandems, more of these guys that are able to take on more. Long gone are the days of a starter playing 70 or 75 games. You have very few of that. Very few goaltenders doing that today. So, good to see him play as well as he did. I think he kept the team right in it for the bulk of the season. Can he do it again? I think he may have to. And of course, you've got Fedotov, sorry, as a backup. And he had really excellent numbers. You go back and look at his KHL numbers over there in Russia, some amazing numbers over there. How does that translate over here? You got a very short, limited look last season. I think they're going to need him. I think that to ask Harrison to go out there and start 55 or 60 games, you might see some cracks in that armor as the season goes. Not to say he's not a good goaltender, but this isn't a player that's used to doing that or should be expected to do that. So I think you're going to need both guys to get going. That's going to have to be a strength of this team if they have any chance at earning that playoff spot. For me, I just think there are too many question marks around this team for this season. Like I said earlier, they're going to play hard. They're going to skate hard. We know that. But can they fix these defensive issues? Does their defensive unit hold up? And do they get enough out of this goaltending tandem, without Carter Hart being part of it? And again, I also worry about this team kind of repeating last season, running out of gas, late in the season. Again, they don't have that cap flexibility to go out and add to this team. So it's either going to be what's in the room right now, maybe some AHL players that come up that can perform. But I just think there's going to be too many other teams in the East. And I think that Metro is going to be pretty darn good as well. You've got a lot of these teams that are kind of right around it, right? The Islanders and Washington are going to be right around it again. Pittsburgh's going to try to push. And then, of course, in the Atlantic, when you factor in maybe a team like Detroit making a push this year, and I fully expect the Red Wings to be pushing for a wild card spot, I think it does leave Philly on the outside looking in. How do they develop some of these young kids? How do they utilize those draft picks that they have coming up? We'll be really curious, but most likely they are out of the playoffs. Of course, I don't have my board with me, but if I did, I'd have the Gollum sticker up there. He's going to be dragging them down to the caves, eating the fish. So sorry, Flyer fans, but I think you're going to get there. I mean, long term, you've got some good young players. You've got that draft capital. We'll see how it all goes. But anyway, guys, that's what I have for you tonight. Minnesota and Detroit are going to be up next. If you do like what you're hearing, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And until next time, be kind, show love, and God bless.